that you're empowered to be able to find the right person.
Absolutely. Well, it's so interesting you say that. I already love this conversation because one of the things, remember, I talked about, y'all, I have this two-lane highway, empowering women and equipping couples, and I find myself dancing between the two because I'm so passionate about them both. But what I tell women all the time is that it's so critically important that you slow your life down long enough to pay attention to you. Now, as a woman of faith,
Mm.
sometimes I know that that can sound very self-centered. We want to die to ourselves and we don't want to lift ourselves higher than what we should. But I
Mhm.
truly believe you want to get a PhD in you.
Welcome to Journey to Joy Live, a podcast to promote wellness, resilience, and inspire joy. Be empowered to balance your mental, physical, financial, aspirational, and social health while providing mental health awareness and breaking down the stigma of mental illness in the Black community. I'm your host, Dr. Int Joy, and I'm here to help you transform life's challenges into opportunities for joy. Let's begin the journey together. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 84 From Trauma to Trust, Rebuilding After Relationship Challenges. And I am very blessed to have a special guest here today, and that is Robin May, LPC. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this conversation.
Oh, yes, because we're in February. I always think about love in February,
Yeah.
self-love, love and relationship, trying to date, hurt, trauma, challenges. So we're going to jump right
All of
into
it.
this. So tell everybody who you are.
I am excited to be here, a fellow woman in the mental health field. We have to stick together. So, again, my name is Robin. I am a licensed professional counselor and an executive coach. And that basically means that all day, every day, I'm in folks' business and holding space for them to navigate the terrains of their life. And so I like to tell people I have what's a two-lane highway. I am very passionate about empowering women. I tell women all the time I'm committed to helping you elevate not just what you do, but
Mm,
who you are. But then that
mm.
second lane is all things marriage, equipping couples. And so I have a network called I Believe in Marriage. And so I combine the two to help people truly live the life God intended.
Oh, that's so awesome. I believe in marriage, and that is really important. And for those who are listening, I've met her. Well, I haven't met, I learned of you when you were a guest at the marriage retreat at my church, the Faith Center, and you were just so amazing, just exuding all the nuggets and wisdom, and it was just awesome. I even almost came to you for couples therapy because let's not get it twisted. We all could use it. I
We
even
all
signed
got to
up and
see the professional
everything.
side.
I
Yeah,
inquired, I submitted a little inquiry and everything, but then you know how that is. The next day, everything's just great, and you're like, "I don't need the couples therapy," but
the whole thing, yeah,
that's a
yeah,
whole nother episode right there. But
yes.
yeah, just excited to have you. And, as we get into this love month, there's a lot of times where and this is kind of like a part two, because in October, I talked about love isn't blind, love is scary, kind of based on that
The
series.
show, yeah,
Yeah, the show, yeah, because it's
yes,
scary because, you put yourself out there, you're vulnerable despite what you done been through in other relationships, and then
yeah.
somebody just breaks your heart again. It's just like, "Oh my
Yeah,
god."
and what's so interesting about that is I wrote a book many years ago, and I actually re-released the book last year, and it's
Mm,
called Before You Take His Name, Before You Take His
mm,
Name. And it's for Christian women on their dating journey, right? So it's not necessarily a lot of people when they hear that title, they think it's immediately for someone who is engaged. But it's really for
mm.
Christian women as they are look at you, our professional. It's called Before You Take His Name, yes. But I mentioned the book only because in the book, I give you 14 questions,
Mhm.
14 questions you need to ask before you say, I do. And
Oh.
the heartbeat of the book is this, based on what you just said. All I'm trying to do is help women mitigate the risk. Love is risky. And like you said,
Mhm.
it is scary. And so we don't know all the things. We can't predict all the things. And as much as we want to, we can't control all the things. But let's do as much as we can to mitigate the risk. Let's try to eliminate some of the risk, as much of the risk as possible. And so you're right. And I think our desire to protect our hearts can
Yeah.
sometimes cause us to shrink back so much, or our longing for that person can cause us to throw away caution. And so we got to find ourselves in that middle ground.
That balance, yeah,
Yes.
between the guardedness or protecting ourselves, that the word protection is better, and then just being vulnerable and putting ourselves back out there. That's good. But what you're just saying right now, it shows that we have some control over this. It's not like it's our fault if we choose the wrong person. But I like saying it the other way is that we're empowered, making sure you're asking the right questions. So based on what you're saying, we have some level of control. You mentioned asking these 14 questions to make sure
Mhm.
we kinda know what we're getting into instead of just kinda jumping into it, and, we're not blaming the victim or saying, "Oh, it's your fault," but the other way
Absolutely.
around is just that you're empowered to be able to find the right person.
Absolutely. Well, it's so interesting you say that. I already love this conversation because one of the things, remember I talked about, y'all, I have this two-lane highway, empowering women and equipping couples, and I find myself dancing between the two because I'm so passionate about them both. But what I tell women all the time is that it's so critically important that you slow your life down long enough to pay attention to you. Now, as a
Mm,
woman of faith, sometimes I know that that can sound very self-centered. We want to die to ourselves and we don't want to lift ourselves higher than what we should. But I
mhm,
truly believe you want to get a PhD in you. You want to
mhm,
understand why you do what you do. You want to understand why you respond the way you respond. You want to understand why you're attracted to what you're attracted to. And when you slow your life down, and
mhm,
you're not operating from a place of desperation, or you're
mhm,
not operating from a place of fear or a place of trauma. It is allowing you to slow your life down, to pay attention to what is working and what isn't working. So, to your point, um, if you understand what your patterns have been in the past, if you
mhm.
could understand your patterns in the past, and that requires getting a PhD in you, slowing down, paying attention. When I'm working with women and they are interested in dating, I tell them, let's do an autopsy on your past relationships, sis. Let's
Yeah.
look at why did they end. Let's look
Mhm.
at what similarities you can find because we often can find patterns. And so, yes, we cannot control all the things, but we can mitigate the risk as much as possible.
That's so good. Those patterns, 'cause when it's been multiple relationships and multiple hurts and pains and breakups, it's like, what's the common pattern? You're the common
Yes,
pattern.
yes,
Slow
absolutely.
down.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's awesome. That's some good stuff. So let's see. What was the first question I was going to ask you? So many people, as we're talking about, we struggle to identify the long term effects of trauma. So you can think about this in different ways. It could be our own
Mhm.
personal traumas that we had, it could be a trauma from a different relationship because it was some domestic abuse or because they cheated. So we can really think of this in different ways.
Yeah.
But, from past relationships. So, how can someone recognize if there's an unresolved trauma and if it's affecting that current relationship?
Well, I think the first thing is trauma is going to affect relationships, right? So let's normalize that first. And I really want to sit there for a minute because one of the things I try to encourage people is to recognize our humanity,
Hmm.
right? I am terrified of dogs, like crazy terrified, like paralyzed terrified.
Oh,
And
no.
so when I go running, right? I go running.
Uh-huh.
I'm just
Ooh,
dropping that nugget there just to get a little
hey.
applause. But I go
Mhm.
running in my neighborhood every other day. And when I'm running, you know the term schema. Watch this. I'm gonna answer this question, but I want you all to understand this term schema.
Mhm,
Schema is a fancy term for how you process information. This is the incredible part about your schema, is
mhm,
how you process information based on past experiences. It, like,
mhm.
gives a shortcut, is your own shortcut to explain what's right in front of you. So, I talked about me being afraid of dogs and terrified. It's because of past trauma. Now,
Mm.
to be fair, I have done nothing to deal with the trauma, okay? I have done no exposure therapy, done nothing. I've
No.
just decided it is what it is. But it's because of past trauma, or maybe if I don't even want to say trauma, just past experiences. So when I'm out running, the way my schema, the way my brain functions,
Mhm,
I can see something in the corner of my eye, and
mhm.
I immediately have a reaction.
Ah.
I see something out the corner of my eye, immediately my heart starts to beat fast.
Mhm,
Immediately, I started looking for an exit strategy.
mhm.
Immediately, my breath gets labored even more until I turn around and realize, "Oh, it's just a ball.
Oh.
Oh, it's just a car moving." But I
Mhm,
immediately have the reaction because it's an unresolved issue.
mhm.
And so how do you know if there's an unresolved trauma? First, let's just normalize depending on the trauma, you may still have a response, but we can
Mhm.
say that it is an unresolved trauma. Number one, my first question to you would be, what work have you put into to resolve it?
Yeah.
Because sis, if you haven't done anything, we already know
Okay.
it's probably lying dormant. And you're probably functioning well enough that people around you wouldn't even know that this is still triggering you. So that's number one. But the second thing is like me, are you having an immediate response that's not congruent to the trigger
To what's
or
even
to the
happening.
situation? So homeboy says, I'll call you later on. And you are ready to cut his tires. You're ready to
Mm.
fight. You're ready to do whatever.
Mm.
Your response is not congruent to what happened. Another way you can tell if there's an unresolved trauma that's affecting current relationships is what we just talked about. When there has been a repetitive pattern,
Mhm.
you keep finding yourself in the same type of relationship or it keeps ending the same way. It could very
Mm.
well be because of an unresolved trauma. So, a few things. Number one, have you done any work around it? If you haven't done any work, more than likely.
Yep.
Number two, are you having a response that's not congruent to the trigger? And then number three, has there been a pattern of behavior? And I really want us to slow down and really think about those three things because this is where freedom comes. Remember, I talked about getting a PhD in you. This
Yes.
is where freedom comes. There is so much freedom when you can slow your life down long enough to pay attention to you. Because listen, this is what I say.
Yeah.
Listen, we can barely control ourselves. We surely can't control anybody else. So let's just do our work so that we can know what is okay and what's not okay in our relationships.
Yeah, focus on what you can control, and that's you.
Yeah, and
And if you
barely.
can't control yourself, that's where therapy comes in at.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and you mentioned, like, is there a pattern of how relationships end? There's a lot of times where relationships are going pretty well, but people say, like, "I just self-sabotage. It's going so well, but I'm afraid if they're gonna
Yes.
leave me. I'm afraid they're gonna abandon me, and I just do things to just end the relationship." Do you see
Yes.
patients that go through that?
Oh my God, absolutely. You know, this I don't know about you, but it's been in the last probably 5 years that I've really leaned into understanding attachment styles, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And discovering your attachment styles, and I know you understand this, but in case somebody else doesn't, there is
Yeah.
research that says that how we connect in relationships is congruent with or a direct connection to
Mhm.
our upbringing, our primary caretakers and how they raised us and what our experience and relationship was
Yeah.
with them. And so when you talk about self-sabotaging, absolutely, there are different types of attachment style. There's secure, there's insecure, and it is avoidant. And so sometimes when you are finding things are going okay and you find yourself retreating or you find yourself sabotaging, more than likely it's connected to your attachment style.
Mm. So self-sabotaging can be related to your attachment style. So that's something to try to
Absolutely.
figure out through either
Yes.
journaling or therapy because we don't always know what our attachment style is.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I love you said that because journaling allows it to get out of your head, and you know, research has shown that actually taking pen to paper is therapeutic, not just typing it into your phone or
Mhm.
typing it onto a laptop, actually taking pen to paper, that there's something therapeutic that happens with that, and so I like to tell clients to mind dump, just get it all out of your head, but also bringing it to someone else, like you said, a therapist, a friend, a pastor, somebody who is gonna be honest and help you see what you can't see.
Mhm. That's key. So let's talk about betrayal. So now, what are the first steps that someone can take to begin rebuilding trust after experiencing betrayal and heartbreak? Because a lot of times people talk about this as like a deal breaker. I don't know the statistic, but it seems like majority of people, if they've been cheated on, they out. They don't stay. But
Mhm,
there are
mm,
people that stay in relationships and end up doing extremely well after a betrayal or
mhm,
after a breakup. But whether
mhm.
you're gonna be the person that leaves and you need some repairing because for that next relationship, or you the person that stays in a relationship and you need some repairing because you need to trust that person again that you're with, what are some steps they can take?
Okay, so I would stand on Mount Rushmore and yell this across the world. I believe that there are 3 critical components to healing after any betrayal or after any, heartbreak. I
Okay.
think these 3 components I have been a licensed therapist for 17 years,
Okay.
and I do not know or do not believe a relationship can truly heal without these 3. So as
Mm.
I'm, building it up with such anticipation, the 3 components that are critical, number 1, personal responsibility. Now again, I am
Mm.
talking about these are character let me be clear. I am talking about these are characteristics that you want to see in the person who did the betraying.
Gotcha.
So, in my world, and I'm assuming probably in yours, the person who did the betrayal is called the participating party. The person who actually participated in the betrayal, the person who was betrayed is called the
Mm.
injured party, right? So,
Mm.
personal, you want to see if you're trying to decide, am I going to stay in this? Can I get over this? You want to see if that person is taking personal responsibility. What does
Mm.
that mean? This person is saying, I am owning what I did. I understand that what I did was not okay. I recognize that this is not because of something you did. It is not, I did this because of you. Now, hear me clearly. I'm not saying that two parties don't contribute to the chaos of a relationship.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that multiple things may not be true at the same time. There could
Mhm.
be have been a trigger. But what I tell people all the time, whoever the participating party is or the person who did the betraying, I
Right.
always say you had plenty of choices. Doing the betrayal did not have to be one of the choices.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you the other 2, but I wanna tell you, I just did a live
Mhm.
on the I Believe in Marriage, YouTube, and you can just go to youtube.com/ I Believe in Marriage. I did a live where I talked about the how to affair proof your marriage. Okay, how to affair proof your
Ooh.
marriage. I gave 7 strategies on how to affair proof your marriage, and one of the strategies is that you wanna be a person who honors the value of fidelity and not somebody who just says, "I'm faithful because of what my partner is doing." So in other words,
Mm.
when we talk yes, that's it. It's I Believe in Marriage on YouTube, and it's 7 strategies to affair-proof your marriage, and so you wanna be the person who honors fidelity because if I'm only faithful or whatever the betrayal is, if I'm only, faithful based on your behavior, my faithfulness is up in the air. I
Yeah.
need to honor faithfulness. I need to honor fidelity as a core value for myself, right?
Wow.
So that's in line with taking personal responsibility. Affair proofs, 7 strategies to affair proof your marriage. And so part 1 is
Fair.
to
Oh,
fair
yes,
proof your marriage. Yes, fair
yes.
proof your marriage. So that's in line with number 1. Personal responsibility. You wanna see that that person is taking personal responsibility. The second one, the
Mhm,
second characteristic you wanna see is a willingness to be accountable, a
mhm,
willingness to be accountable, accountable to the partner and accountability to a counselor, an advisor, someone that's going to help navigate the terrains.
mhm.
Accountability. So, in other words, I tell people all the time, again, in the context of marriage or even in a serious relationship, but I tell people in marriage, if you don't want to be accountable, you don't want to be married. If you're the person who's saying nobody can
Mm.
tell me anything, I don't want nobody to check me, I don't want to answer about where I am, then you're not ready to be in a committed
Yeah, for
relationship, right?
sure.
So, number 2, you wanna see accountability to your partner. There is research that says relationships that last the longest are one of the characteristics of a long-lasting relationship is a willingness to be influenced by your partner. And
Yes,
so if I'm not willing to be accountable
that's
to you,
great.
and after there's been a betrayal or after you've done something that has been heartbreaking, not only are you accountable to me, but we are then accountable to someone else. Again,
Mhm.
it can be a counselor, it can be a couple that you all respect, it can be your pastor, but there has to be accountability. And then the third characteristic is transparency.
Oh, yes.
After there needs to be transparency
Course.
anyway, but after
Yes.
betrayal, you have lost the right to try to be secretive.
Mm-mm, can't do
There
it.
needs to be you're gonna have to be an open book, right? To and watch this, and this is the sticking point. If any of my clients happen to roll across this video, here is the sticking point in that. The participating party or the person who did the betrayal, you don't get to determine S excuse me, you don't get to determine the level of transparency.
Gotcha, yeah.
I'll show you this, but I'm not gonna show you that.
Mhm, yeah,
Not if your heartbeat is to rebuild the trust in the marriage or in the
exactly.
relationship. It doesn't have to be just the marriage. If your desire is to rebuild the trust, once trust has been broken once trust has been broken, it is unfair for you to have an expectation that I trust you.
Oh, ooh, oof.
Once trust
Takes
has been
time.
broken, it's unfair for you to have a when my daughters were little, I have 3 girls, they're 10, 15, and 17,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
I don't think I did this for the 10-year-old, but when the 15 and 17-year-old were much younger, I got the Jenga blocks, and I
Uh-huh.
just put words like honesty, trust,
Oh, nice.
commitment, all that on the Jenga box, and I just started pulling the Jenga blocks for them, and then
Uh-huh.
eventually, of course, they fail, and what I told them was, "That's what happens with trust. You slowly begin to erode the trust, and when the trust is gone, it's
Yeah.
very hard to build it back up." And
Mhm.
so, if you have done the betraying, if you want your partner to trust you again, you are going to have to take personal responsibility. You're going to have to be open to accountability, and you're going to have to commit to transparency.
Yes, yes, so they have a lot of work to become trustworthy, and what
Yes.
about the other person? Like, I do feel like there's some parts, with time where they can start to work on being trust willing, because they can't if they're gonna try to stay in that relationship, they can't keep throwing it back up in their faces a year later. Well, you cheated," especially y'all been doing fine, and here you go throwing that back up in his face or her face. So
Well,
what about that end?
so that's an interesting it's true, first of all, of course, it's
Yeah.
true, but it's tricky. Let me
It
tell you
is.
why I say it's tricky. First of all, when there's been any type of breach and we both are committed to working on the breach, that's why I said
Both.
accountability is very important.
Yeah.
Because you both have to be willing to work on it. Now, the person who did the betraying must take ownership of moving the relationship forward. In other words,
Mhm.
you are really taking the initiative. But the person who was betrayed, if you are saying you're going to stay, if you're saying you're willing to do this, it is having a willingness to turn your heart towards God and
Yeah.
toward that person.
Mhm.
But this reason why I said it gets tricky because number one, triggers are real.
Yes.
And what often happens when there has been a betrayal, it is like there is the person who did the betraying or did whatever the heartbreak was. I want you to imagine that person is holding a big rock, right? And
Mhm.
they walking around with this rock because unless they're a psychopath, they care about the fact that they're doing this, right? Like,
Yeah.
not like most of the time, they're not like, I don't care nothing about them most of the time. So they feel the guilt. That rock is like a big, that guilt is like a big rock.
Mhm.
And then their partner finds out. It's like they've taken that rock and now you've given it to your partner. There's almost relief for the
Mm.
person who did the betraying. They're like, "Ooh, that's
True.
off of me." and now you done gave it to your partner, and now your
Mhm.
partner who didn't do the betraying is having to carry this heavy rock, and
Mhm.
it's your responsibility to come alongside them and help them carry it, and watch this.
Oh.
You don't get to be the person to tell them when they should no longer be bothered by it.
Oh, that's true.
You don't get to tell them that. That's why I talked about the accountability. Because
Yeah.
if you invite accountability in, like you or like me, when I'm working with a couple, now I'm the one that can say to the person who was injured, okay, now I've watched him or I've watched her jump through 15 hoops. I've watched them do 15 jumping jacks. I've watched them do 20 push ups. This analogy,
All
I've
the
seen them
things.
do all the things, and your heart hasn't changed. What
Mm.
else are you needing? What is missing? What are we not understanding? Right? Because you've invited accountability in. And so I totally agree with you. But
Yeah.
there is a level of responsibility on both
Both
parties.
ends.
You really need somebody else to help you walk through that because many times the person who was the participating party, they are often saying, you should be over this by now. I don't know why you're still dealing with
Mm, that yeah, that does happen. You can't tell me when to be
it. Right.
over it. But if it comes a certain time where you just can't get over it and you're constantly triggered by it, then maybe that relationship just you can't stay in that
Yes,
relationship.
and I will say this to be fair, even to the person who did the betraying, and I often have this conversation.
Mhm.
You have every right to decide, "I don't know that I'm willing to do what it takes to help rebuild the trust." Now, that takes a
Mm.
lot of courage. It
Right,
takes a lot
right.
of self-honesty, but
Yeah.
you may say, "You know what? I know I did this, and honestly, I just don't have what it takes to keep to try to rebuild it." That's painful probably to the person who's been injured, but if you are gonna say, "I'm gonna rebuild," you're gonna say, "I'm willing for us to try." We
Mhm.
have to hold our hands together as we navigate it.
Yeah, and a lot of times the person who did the betraying have already felt betrayed in another way. So, like, maybe their
Mm,
spouse just hasn't been there. They've been committed to work so much. They didn't cheat, but they just haven't been there. Or, that
yeah.
person did the betraying just wasn't getting what they could or wanted or needed out of relationship. So then they just went out. I mean, they probably should just broke up with them at that point. But
Well,
still.
yeah, but so you
So
remember what I said? I said, when there has been a betrayal,
mhm.
the person who did the betraying, whatever it was, there were a lot of options.
Yeah. Right.
There were a lot of options, right? If
Talk about it.
and we have to say that infidelity or cheating is not the only type of betrayal. There are many ways that
Right.
betrayal can occur, but there are many. Like if I am not satisfied in my relationship, that's why I go back to what your own values are. If I'm not satisfied in my relationship, I have a lot of options I can take to address that dissatisfaction.
Mhm. You can communicate.
Now, watch this. And yes, and look, I can leave.
Mhm.
I can go to counseling myself. I can tell you that we have to go to counseling. I can practice boundaries. I can have that hard conversation. There are many things I can do. And if you insist on continuing in this betrayal, not this betrayal, this behavior that's
Mhm.
leading to my dissatisfaction, now I got a decision to make.
We have to decide. That's good. So this leads right into the next question. So forgiveness, often seen as a critical part of healing. We know that for you and that other person.
Mhm,
But it's also incredibly challenging, of course. How do you
mhm,
advise clients to approach forgiveness, both for themselves or both of themselves and for others?
mhm. Yeah, so forgiveness is such a God invitation. I'm gonna say it again. Such a God invitation. God invites us, and actually, the people of
Mm.
faith commands us to forgive. And I've done some studying on this, and part of the reason when you study the scriptures about forgiveness, a part of the reason is because when you don't forgive, you are bound in that offense. You are weighed down by that offense. Forgiveness gives you freedom from the offense, right? You're no longer
Oh,
yoked. You're no longer yoked to the offense. And
Mhm.
so that's why God is so good to us. He's saying, "You need to forgive, you need to let it go, because if you keep holding on to it, you are yoked to
Mhm.
that offense. You're yoked to that pain." And even we're talking about in a relationship, a current relationship, but some people are still yoked to the person who did them wrong, the parent that broke their heart, the situation that happened way back when they were 15. They are yoked to it because they
Mhm.
believe that forgiveness is giving that person the pass. Forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things.
Yeah.
Forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. And so forgiveness is a beautiful invitation from God. And even when we talk about forgiving ourselves, I told you I have these three girls. And
Uh-huh.
when any of my daughters, I've really been saying it lately, but whenever they are saying something negative about themselves, I'm like, hello, you look like me, you act like me, so don't talk about you, baby, because you're talking about me, right?
Exactly.
And then I go a step further and I say, it's interesting. The Bible says you were made in the image of God. And the way you're talking about, if I was God, I would be saying, well, geez, you're made in my image and this is what you think. Why am I bringing that up?
Mhm.
Because the beautiful thing when we talk about forgiving ourselves, if Jesus died for our shortcomings, for our sins, and we refuse to let it go. What we're saying is, those stripes didn't count for me. Those stripes counted
Yeah.
for everybody else. Those stripes didn't count for me. And so when you forgive yourself, it is really acknowledging your humanity. It is
Mhm.
acknowledging your area and acknowledging your need for God.
Forgive
And
yourself.
then forgiving others frees you from that bondage, frees you from that yoke. And so remember, I said forgiveness and reconciliation don't have to be the same thing, but we also don't want to sit in that. I can forgive you, but I'm not going to reconcile with you because you don't know if God is asking for reconciliation as well.
Exactly. That's some real stuff. I won't read this whole comment for obvious reasons, but someone is asking, are you open for clients? Because you are a relationship therapist. So we going to put a little commercial plug. You looking for clients, Miss Robin?
Oh, I'm always open for clients. Absolutely. You can just go to my website, robinmayonline.com.
Thank you, Lightworker Wayne. All right, so thank you for that on forgiveness. Now, for someone listening today, what are three, at least three, practical strategies or actions that they can take this week to just begin this journey from trauma to
Mhm.
trust again so that their relationship can thrive?
Okay, so if I were to say very practically, three strategies, this is going to sound so elementary, but I would really encourage you to create a schedule, an intentional schedule for you just to be still, for you to get a pen and a paper, light a candle. Fellas and ladies, light a candle. I tell people to turn on instrumental jazz or
Hey,
instrumental gospel, something that's not wordy, that you can just rest and really begin to put pen to paper about what is happening inside of you. Get it out, write it down,
journaling.
release it. There's a release that comes from that. So, the first strategy I would say is to take it from mind to paper, get it out, and create a consistent strategy to do that. The second thing I would do is to encourage you to find someone trusted that you can speak with. And of course, I'm going to say a licensed therapist. That's, of course, what I'm going
Or
to say. But again, it can also be someone who you trust. And this is what I want you to, when I talk about finding a trusted source that you can share your heart with, you
mhm.
want to make sure it's somebody who's doing their own work. If it's not gonna be a therapist, you wanna go to somebody, talk to somebody who's doing their own work, who's not gonna project their trauma onto you and y'all just trauma bonded,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
wanna find somebody who's doing so number 1, take it from mind to paper. Number 2, make sure you find somebody that you can talk to consistent, find a trusted person. I love how you summarize that. And then the third thing I would do is this is something that I often encourage clients to do. Personify what freedom looks like to you.
Oh.
Personify what freedom looks like to you. So let me tell you. There is a scripture that says, talks about freedom, and it says, "Don't let yourself become entangled again.
Mhm.
Don't let yourself become entangled again." And so for me, freedom is not being entangled. So what did I get? I got a ball of yarn that
Mm.
sits on my dresser.
Okay.
It looks a lot like that actually, but
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
ball of yarn that sits on my dresser because that's a visual representative for me that I'm not going to get entangled again. You know how yarn is all entangled? For me, that's what that looks like. One client in this, idea of not of personifying what freedom looks like, she was not able to have fresh relationships. Watch this. Y'all are gonna think this is so corny, but this girl loved this. She couldn't have fresh relationships because what we discovered is that everybody she met, she was painting them with the same strokes, right? They were getting painted the same way. So she got a
Mm.
paintbrush and she
Mhm.
just kept the paintbrush in her car, a small little paintbrush, because she said, I'm not going to paint everybody with the same stuff. That's a visual personification of what freedom looks like to me. One of my best
Mm.
friends took this strategy and she is stay ready. Okay. She is stay ready. She pops off. You say hi, and she's like, what? She pops off. So for her, freedom is to step back from popping off. So you know what her visual is? She has a little bat on her keychain, a
Uh-huh.
small little bat. That
Uh-huh.
bat represents Imma stop knocking people out every time I engage with them.
Oh,
So
good.
find something to personify what freedom looks like to you. Why do we do that? So I talked about writing it down, I talked about having
Mhm.
somebody you talk to and then personifying it.
Mhm.
Because we are mind, body, and spirit.
Yep.
We are mind, body, and spirit, and you wanna do different things. That's why I love vision boards, but I often tell people your vision board can just become decor after a while. It can just kinda blend into the background. So I tell people, if you're gonna do a vision board, move it around in your house. Don't keep it at the same place because after a while, your brain stops registering that. And so we wanna do mind, body, and spirit, different things that's going to lead you toward trust after trauma.
Really, really good. Those were some great strategies. Well, Robin, before we go, we got another comment from the comment gallery. Now, Lightworker Rain was a guest on the podcast back in July. We were talking about being angry, black, and I forget the other word, but mental health, that's for sure. So his question: Are you strictly faith based? Do you also do couples therapy without the religious undertone as well?
So, am I faith-based and do I do couples okay, so definitely faith-based. Definitely do couples therapy, but I will say I am who I am. I'm a pastor's wife. I love Jesus, but in my clinical work, I do not project my faith onto clients. That's not even ethical. And so I am very clear to ask clients what their value system is because in 2025, even those who have the same value system as mine is not really the same. And so while I am faith-based, I definitely am able to support people who aren't.
Awesome, thank you. And that's what I tell people too, like, basically, when I find out they're Christian and I ask them, like, "You're Christian, I'm Christian, let's talk about scripture, let's do these things when it comes in," because our healing, there can be therapy, there could be medication, but also our religion is a part of it too. So if you
Absolutely.
are a faith-believing person, use that as part of your healing as well. Young,
Absolutely.
Black, and Angry, that's what it was called.
Yo,
I don't know, I'm letting
gotta go back and listen to that.
Wh Oh, yeah, yeah, Lightworker Wayne. So, thank you so much for joining. I always ask everybody because 'cause you're on Journey to Joy Live, so I always ask, everyone that comes on as a guest what your journey to joy has been like. So you can talk about your personal journey to joy or your
Yes.
relationship journey to joy, but what's it been like for you?
That's such a do I wanna do personal or okay, so I think I'll do personal. So, first of all, with a relationship, my husband and I, in a couple of weeks, toward the end we're in February already. So February 23rd, we'll be celebrating 23 years of marriage.
Woo!
And, that's a whole nother conversation. My husband proposed, called off the wedding. I could just give you a whole story
Ooh.
in that. But we've been together 30 years and we've been married 23 years. And there's so much to that. But I'll talk to my personal journey to joy. One of the things I began to understand for myself, and I want to share this with everybody, I began to understand that for me, joy is connected to my values. right, to what I deeply value. And what I believe is when you don't honor your deepest values, you will always have an undercurrent of life dissatisfaction. Let me say that
Mhm.
again. When you don't honor your deepest values, whatever those values are. And so if you don't know your values, that's a big deal. So when you don't honor your deepest values, you'll always have life dissatisfaction. So my journey to joy was really leaning in to my value system. Now the reality is we are human, and there are days when I'm up and there are days when I'm down. I already know that when I am down, I know how to get back to up by checking in to see which of my value system am I not
Mhm.
honoring. And when I can get clear about
Mm.
that, my 5 core values, when I can get back to that, I can get back to joy.
It all goes back to journaling, reflecting, knowing who you are, knowing who what your values are, you living authentically, and then your joy is right there.
Absolutely,
Doesn't mean
absolutely,
you don't experience challenges. Joy, you can still be there. Thank you
absolutely.
so much. So you can find Robin at robinmayonline.com
Yes,
as well as on IG on at Robin May Online.
yes.
So anywhere else we can find you? You mentioned your book,
Well, all of that, everything that has to do
everything.
with me can be found on Robin May Online, so that's perfect.
It's all there. All right. Thank you so much, Robin. Really
Thank you
appreciate
for
you.
having me, I appreciate it.
No problem. This has been an Enjoy Life production. If you're in a crisis, don't hesitate. Call, text, or chat 988 for immediate support. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional treatment. If you're looking for therapy or medication management through Enjoy Life, visit www.drenjoylife.com to request a consultation. I accept Aetna for Georgia residents, and out-of-pocket services are available for others. I'm licensed in Georgia, Florida, Michigan, Tennessee, Maryland, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Illinois, Virginia, and Minnesota. Be sure to grab your copy of the Enjoyno on Amazon for $39.08 to help you on your wellness journey. And remember, Journey to Joy Live is every Thursday at 7 p.m. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, may you continue to transform challenges into joy.